Okay, the first time I heard about you was, do you know who Raging Tomato Sarah is?
Yes.
Okay, the first time I heard about you, she reached out because she wanted to connect with Myron, because she wants you and Myron to debate.
Well, that was very recent. That's
Yeah.
the first time you heard about me?
That's the first time I heard about you, like, enough to, like, connect a name to the face, yeah.
I guess our circles are also very different.
What circles are you normally in? Oh, wait, I should predict this. You've got lots of books and lots of intelligent...
I didn't read any of them. So
No, of course not. That's the key to having lots of books in your background. You don't read any of them. If you do anything, you listen to them on Audible. And then you've got some important looking figures behind you. I'm going to guess you run in it used to be a skeptic circle, but skeptics aren't cool anymore. So it's like skeptics in 2025 circle, very intelligentsia, probably likes Abundance by Ezra Klein.
The funny thing is, you got close there, but I was generally always a loner. So, but I've always been the ex-Muslim, former Muslim, skeptic, critic of Islam circles, but also kind of close to
Rationalist.
Christian apologists circles.
Are you
More
Christian
so than
now?
the atheist circles. I recently became a Christian, so I'm currently on my way to get baptized in the Orthodox Church. So yeah.
You went Eastern Orthodox.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, tell me about that. What appealed to you about Eastern Orthodox? I'm a Protestant, so it's always interesting.
Well, so I looked online and I saw that it was very, very super based and stuff. So I thought, this is perfect.
You're like, God, they're so mean online. Yes.
Well, the funny thing is, so up until a few months ago, I would say until a few months ago, I was still an agnostic. 2 years ago, had you asked me, I would have said I'm totally an atheist. I don't believe in anything, in any of those things. But as I was approaching Christianity recently, I thought the last thing that I would go for would be Orthodox Christianity. But much of that was because of how Orthodox Christianity is presented online on social media. Because I thought these people are terrible.
Yeah, they're very mean. Which is crazy because if you meet Eastern Orthodox like IRL, they're usually like the nicer branch. Like Catholics can be a little mean. Protestants are crazy, especially in North America, crazy people. And then the Eastern Orthos are just like, we're just minding our own business. But online, they're like Nazi adjacent. Almost always.
There's a huge disconnect between how Eastern Orthodox are in real life and how they are online, and I don't know what that has to do with. I guess it's there's something about Orthodoxy being associated with traditionalism and with pure old ancient Christianity, and I guess there is a type of people online that looks for that kind of stuff, but then gets it completely wrong, and they don't understand what exactly it is that makes it so ancient and all that. So they think it. They often go for the whole, this is the most super based one, the most anti-modern one, and all that. But that's not really what Orthodoxy is about. And because I saw those trends online, I always had this icky feeling about Orthodox Christians, honestly, and Orthodox Christianity, and I see that many people still have that. And I've seen so many people tell me I was almost going to convert to Orthodox Christianity, but because of the way the people act online, I decided not to. I see this very, very often. And if you bring this critique to the Orthodox Christian people online, they will just laugh and say, "Oh, you were just looking for something nice. We're super based and all that." But so all of this aside, Orthodox Christianity in real life is not like that at all, especially on the Greek side. And there's something really powerful about it, in that it's different from Western Christianity in a way where it is less structured, less organized in terms of everything defined. It is less rationalized, less put into, less explained. It is more mystery and more just experience and more simply meant to be pure Christianity as it was adopted from the disciples and the apostles, and so that is one aspect of it, and much of that appeals to me, and I think that as I look into Christianity and as I look into the history of Christianity, I think that that Orthodox Christianity is kind of the way that it was meant to be at the beginning, and I like it.
Interesting. Okay, so 2 years ago, you were an atheist. Were you ever an anti-theist? Like, did you ever go through the anti-theist? Just hit the switch.
Funnily enough, not really.
Okay.
Because only for a very short time after I became an atheist, I guess that I had this harsh reaction to belief in God, and I was a little bit angry. But only for a very short time, maybe for a year or less, I had such an attitude. But then I got over it very quickly, and I didn't really like anti-theism. And I get it. I understand why some people do it, but I never really appreciated it, honestly.
Okay, so then what about Greek Orthodoxy specifically pulled you in? Like, what was your conversion experience like? Obviously, this isn't what we plan to talk about. So anything you don't want to talk about as well, you can just tell me to fuck off. I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's a difficult question, actually, because I'm kind of, I've spent the last 2-3 months or so just sitting down and trying to take it all in and learn as much as I can about the faith and all that. So when people come and ask me now about it, I often don't really know what to say. And I'm just busy taking in the stuff and learning it, and less about explaining it.
Are you
I
Greek?
feel like I want to leave the explaining more to when I'm baptized. No, I'm actually of Turkish origin.
Okay.
But I probably do have some Greek history, which I'm a little bit disconnected from. It's the case with most people in Turkey. They are kind of they were Islamicized people of Greek or Armenian origins and all that. So I probably have some of that Armenian Greek stuff.
Gotcha.
But I've always had an admiration for Greek culture and for the Greeks. And I guess there was also some of that kind of drew me into Orthodox Christianity. Once I went to a Greek Orthodox church, I thought, hey, this is really, really nice. You know?
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Because I know I do my best. Typically, I talk very little about my faith and spirituality because I think it's very dangerous online to be potentially erected as like a spiritual leader. And I take that really, really, really seriously, which is why I actually talk very minimally about my faith by and large, because I have a pretty heterodox Protestant approach. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of radical Orthodox, but it's just a branch of theology that engages in kind of biblical analysis in a very different way. It tries to engage with the books in the way that the original cultures and writers wrote them and intended them, and kind of tries to approach them, particularly Old Testament, from somewhat of an Eastern approach in how they write and think. So it's it's very odd, but I'm still protesting the Catholic Church, so I'm a Protestant technically. But also I do my best not to talk about my faith that much, because being such an unorthodox, uncommon form of Protestant and whatnot, I recognize that I could be wrong, and I don't want to steer people incorrectly. Are you comfortable talking more about your faith, or do you want me to steer clear? Because it's totally up to you.
I mean, it's understandable that you don't want to go into it as much. I am generally fine with it. I just, at this stage, I've said recently often that I don't want to engage in, for example, interdenominational commentary or why this one is wrong and this one is right or anything like. So I don't want to do that kind of stuff. I also don't really have the whole. I don't really share the whole attitude of mine is right and the others are wrong. So although I technically kind of agree with the stance in the Orthodox Church that this is the fullness of the faith, I abstain from arguing that the others are wrong or why the others are wrong or any of that kind of stuff. So I mean we can talk on faith basis and I guess we could do that, right?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
I guess because I'm trying to think about what would be interesting to talk about for me, but also realizing that there's an audience, right? So trying to like not get into like esoteria. Okay, as a Christian, how do you feel about the rise of kind of Christian nationalism? Particularly, I'm not sure. Are you familiar with sedevacantivism?
Yeah.
Okay, so for those who are unfamiliar with sedevacantivism, I'm going to butcher defining them, but essentially, if I'm understanding them correctly, they're a very, very traditionalist sect of Catholicism that tends to reject the last 7. It's a different number now of popes. They essentially think that most of the recent popes have been too woke, have been not traditionalist enough, and they reject their teachings. I'm not sure if you're familiar much with American politics, but a lot of recent right to life bills have been pushed really strongly by fundamentalist Christians and essentially fundamentalist Catholics. What do you think about this like rise of like this weird version of Christianity in American politics?
Yeah, I actually happen to be in America as well, so I probably know a little bit about it, but not too much. So sedevacantism would be those Catholics who opposed the Vatican after the 1960s, when the Second Vatican Council happened. They basically took the stance that the Vatican, by adopting certain policies of ecumenism and abandoning tradition and introducing a new mass, they have fallen into heresy. So those Catholics don't recognize the current popes anymore and see them as heretics and consider the seat empty. So that's literally what it means, the empty seat, or empty seatism. And there are lots of such trends around among the traditionalist Christians, among the traditionalist Orthodox as well. There are some among the evangelical movements that have this attitude of being hardcore pro tradition and pro religion and government and so on. So here's the thing: I don't always want to get too political, but I would say that it's a kind of a funny time to be in for me personally, because had you asked me about these things like a year or two ago, I would have said, "Oh yeah, I'm absolutely pro secularism, completely separate, religion from government and religious influence from government entirely." I think over the last 2 years, things changed a little bit for me as well, and I thought to myself, I think right now it's not entirely harmful to have some religious influence in the government, and democracy to a great extent is actually pretty messed up and has become a failure in many ways. Okay. That said, I still haven't really moved from my position that we should essentially or eventually separate religion and government, because while I see that the hardcore secularism has kind of brought a lot of harm to Western societies, I'm still not sure if reacting to that with bringing religion back into governance is the right answer or the right solution.
How do you think secularism has harmed? Do you think it's harmed democracy specifically? Or I guess maybe to back it up, you said that democracy is in a fucked place. Why do you think it's in a messed up place?
I'm laughing because this just reminded me of this sound, but I don't know if you're aware of it, of this Osho, this cult leader who said democracy is government by the people, for the people, of the people, but the people are retarded. So
that's true.
That's what's coming to my mind right now.
Yeah.
But looking at democracy and looking at how people make decisions about different things makes me think that there are lots of people who make decisions, in the decision-making process in democracy that who shouldn't be part of the process of making decisions for society, because they're not necessarily very well informed. They're not necessarily very smart. They can't necessarily discern what is better for society and what is not. Then again, who am I to judge who should be, in charge instead? So, but I would say that democracy has led to certain issues that I personally find very, very problematic and grotesque. For example, in Europe, it has led to this culture of let's just be tolerant of everyone and everything, and let's let everybody in. Let's share our countries and our societies with everyone who wants to come here. Let's have no religious biases. All religions are essentially cool and all that, or equally bad or equally valid. So this is a very, very secularist trend and approach in Europe, and in my opinion, it is a very destructive one because it led to filling European countries with massive numbers of people who really shouldn't be there. For example, people from the Muslim cultures, people of Muslim origins, Islamists, and all that. It led to European countries climbing from 1% or less than 1% Muslim population to 6, 8, 10% Muslim population, which now in the long run only leads to problems. Problems after problems, terrorist attacks, social instability, the eroding of human rights and all that. So the same thing can be said in certain senses about America, although America is still quite distant from that. I know in America you usually have different problems about the influence of religion, and I usually find those minor problems. I look more at Europe because in Europe there are more serious problems.
So it's interesting. So I grew up fundamentalist Protestant. So I grew up learning a lot about Israel and learning Islam bad. And then as I moved out of fundamentalism, obviously that led to me like looking at all of these inherited structures, as we could call them, from my childhood and from my life, and evaluating whether or not they were good. And I don't know if you know, I was in Israel for 3 weeks about a week ago, filming and talking to people about the Israel-Palestinian war, because light topics are fun. And one thing that I thought was very interesting that made me think again is this topic of political Islam came up obviously a lot. Obviously, Israel is very concerned about political Islam, and there isn't really a way to engage with, in my view, there isn't really a good way to engage in trying to understand the tensions around within the Middle East without understanding the relationship of Judaism with Islam and Christianity to some extent, but really these two kind of factions that are at tension and at odds with one another. And so they very much view any form of political Islam as very, very bad. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. I also went to Israel at the beginning of 2014, so just a few months after the October 7th terrorist attack. Spent like a week there or so, talked to lots of people. But even before I went there, I come from a Muslim culture, and I was raised in a very strictly religious Islamic family, in a very Muslim family. And the thing is, when I speak to people who don't necessarily know what it is like to be a Muslim, or don't necessarily understand Muslim culture and Muslim thinking, I see that people don't, or people fail to see how bad the Islamic way of thinking actually is. I grew up learning as a very, very as a child in school when I was very little, for example, that in the near future, possibly, the time will come when we Muslims will fight the Jews and we will kill them all. And
where were you growing up?
To happen,
if I could ask. In Germany.
In Germany. I was in Germany. So I was born to a family of immigrants in Germany. And while I'm in Germany, while I'm surrounded by non-Muslim people there in a non-Muslim country, I was at the same time learning that Christians and Jews are basically our enemies, as they are meant to be, as the Quran says, and that as Muhammad prophesied it, we will in the future fight and kill the Jews, and even the rocks and trees will say, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him, except for one magical tree which will not betray the Jews, and all that. So this is, and if you're wondering where this insanity comes from, it's not just something that people came up with. It's not just something that is like, modern inventions, modern folklore. This is directly from Muhammad, the prophet of Islam, he said these words. So he prophesied this. So from the very beginning of Islam, there is this prophecy that the Muslims will fight and eradicate the Jews. And so throughout history, the Muslims kind of tolerated the Jews as like as a little minority that can live as long as they do whatever we say. Whenever they got a little bit too active, the Muslims started pogroms against them. But especially right now, during this time, while the tensions are very heightened, Muslims around the world are aware of this prophecy, and they are promising that to each other. Hamas has it in their founding charter. The Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, that is supposed to be the good one, they preach this stuff in the mosques to their populations. That be patient. The time will come when we will fight and kill the Jews. So this kind of stuff is directly, it's not just fundamentalism, it's not just extremist Islam, it is directly normal, mainstream, standard Islam. So as long as, and this is just a tiny part of it, but this is what Islam is. It is a very, very, very messed up, bad religion.
Do you think so one of my issues, a really common talking point, is that I'll hear people talk about political Islam. And one of my concerns is, not that I'm an expert on the Quran by any means, but my read of the Quran, when I've engaged with it in the past, when I was like kind of soul searching when it came to religion, is that it feels like political Islam is very tied to the foundations of what Islam is. Like it feels like Sharia law and trying to achieve a political statehood of like a Muslim country is baked in a way that it isn't in Christianity, right? In Christianity, there's this idea of evangelization, but there isn't really a statehood that becomes like an essential part of the faith. What's my take? And I guess a lot of people watching are going to say, maybe your family was just really extreme. Like maybe your family was just kind of an extreme group.
You're very correct. In Christianity, so after the Romans converted to Christianity, it became, of course, part of the government. And the church started working together with the government and all that. But even in the early history of Christianity, many people who are considered saints and teachers of the church have always been kind of critical about this relationship, and it has often been pointed out, like this is known in Orthodox history, that making the church part of or a partner of the government has always led to diversions from what Christianity is supposed to be, and has led to the politicization of Christianity, which kind of led to corruptions and injustices and all that. So it's not always considered a good thing in Christian history. With the Catholic Church, it's a different issue. With the Catholic Church, things went a little bit differently, especially after the schism. But Christianity fundamentally doesn't have this idea that that you're supposed to take control of society and establish an empire and all that. I mean, it's very clear. Jesus says, "My kingdom is not of this world." It is about having faith and believing, being born again, spreading the faith to each other, and all that. It's not about an earthly reign. In Islam, it's very different. And I probably referenced this like 1,000 times in my life so far, but there is a book by Ibn Khaldun, who is a middle-age scholar of Islam and who is considered kind of a forerunner of sociology. He wrote a book called Muqaddimah, which is very, very fundamental to Islamic history and sociology. He says in his book, Islam is very different from Christianity and Judaism in that Christianity and Judaism don't have an inbuilt mission to spread the religion on a universal basis. While in Islam, he says, it is the mission, the duty of the ruler, who is the leader of the Muslims, and also the leader of the politics, to protect Islam within, but also to spread Islam around the world by will or by force. Like, these are literally his words. So it has been understood from the beginning that Muslims are supposed to not just evangelize, because this is how Christianity started. Christianity started with evangelizing, with going around and traveling and convincing others and speaking to them. Islam started with fighting, with establishing a state, establishing an army, and then going to a population saying, "Hey, it's time to convert to Islam. If you don't accept it, you can become our slaves, or you can pay this much protection money, and we can tolerate you for a while, or we will just fight you and you will die." So that's it. This is how Islam started out. This is how Muhammad started. And this is, once again, as you just pointed out, it's not just political Islam. Islam is fundamentally political. So it is a political force. Political Islam is Islam. Islam is political Islam. This is the big problem.
How do you, so I feel like the lib reaction though, in me, okay, I can feel it in my soul, is that every time I think this way, which is like, I look at Islam and I'm like, we can allow nations to exist that are Islamic in a theocracy. They're really dangerous. They tend to abuse human rights and they tend to want to take over countries around them. Like I'm not a big fan of them. And then the lib in me goes, you're like a step away from becoming just like racist to Arab people, because it's so linked, right? And I don't want to do that. I genuinely want to be able to see some distilling. So I guess like the question is, how? You chuckled when I said that. So what are your thoughts, I guess?
Well, the thing is, so in the past, I have very often been very antagonizing and insulting, and most of the time I didn't care. More recently, I've kind of adopted a different mindset of trying to go about it a different way and being more, trying to appeal to a more human side within those whose beliefs I oppose very firmly. But I guess no matter what, here's the thing. You can oppose Islam as a religion and as a political system while also being good toward Muslims. Because so the best thing would be for Muslims to leave Islam behind, right? So the best thing would be for Muslims to leave Islam behind, to leave Islam and to convert to a different religion, or I don't know, maybe even become atheists, whatever it is. Maybe that's the first step. But if they leave Islam behind and become something else, I will be happy for them and I will see no problem with them at all. This means that I don't really have a problem with those people. I have a problem with what they believe in. The same thing would be true if we are talking about, I don't want to go there, but Nazis, for example, neo-Nazis. It wouldn't be that I necessarily have a big problem with the human who is very, very much capable of changing. Seriously, I have more of a problem with the things that the person believes in, and I could imagine sitting down with a person who has horrible beliefs and slowly changing their minds and coming to love them and appreciate them and befriend them and all that. I want what's good for everyone, what's good for Muslims, but for most, I have to prioritize keeping society, keeping myself, keeping my loved ones, and so on safe. And if that means that we have to take certain measures, such as putting a halt on, Muslim immigration, for example, or Islamic influence in our country, and even if that is perceived as racist or as discriminatory, we just have to do it, because I can't really concern myself with how they will perceive it or if it will be deemed racist. If the alternative is just too problematic. Islam is too problematic, and we have to deal with that.
Do you think though, I feel like a common argument that I hear is like, if they move to so say you've got a family, they're from Afghanistan, they're refugees, they move to Germany or they move to another democracy, secular democracy, give them 1, maybe 2 generations, and they're going to be culturally identical to the broad space around them. Do you disagree with this, or?
Yeah, I disagree, because this is how Germany thought. So in Germany, there was this whole debate about, very funny. My parents went to Germany as supposed guest workers. Their parents and their grandparents went there as supposed guest workers, because Germany had this whole system of inviting guest workers because they needed more labor. So the Turks and others arrived there, and the idea is, don't worry, everyone. Of course, we're not going to keep these culturally very different people here forever. They're going to go back once they have made some money and helped us out. The issue is it didn't really go that way because the people didn't want to go back because the places they came from were horrible, and Germany is a much better place to live. So then Germany wanted to send them back, but they couldn't send them back because it was too much effort, too expensive. So they had to somehow integrate them. And the idea was, okay, let's not worry. We offer very good integration programs and all that. And if we give these people time, they will change and they will be just like us. Now, in 10 years ago or so, Angela Merkel, when she was still the head of Germany, she gave a speech about this whole integration issue. And she said, we used to think we could just do this whole, integration, immigration, integration, and multiculturalism, and everything will be okay. But it has been a complete failure. So she admitted this because people are a little bit naive because they think, oh, these are just different cultures, but they're just people like you and me. And if they come here, if they live among us, they will slowly adapt and integrate and change, and everything will be cool. That's just not really how it works. Islam is, as a religion, a very strong religion.
Why?
A very strong
like
culture.
What's different? Because I feel like for Christians, they watch their children go to university and convert away in mass numbers. So what's so special about Islam that it's
it
doing
has very
this?
It has a very deeply entrenched aspect of not being just faith, but rather being identity, nationality. Like Muslims don't generally see it just as a faith. They say they view it as a nation, as a community. They view Christians and Jews as two nations. There's actually a funny saying among Muslims, which is that the disbelievers are one nation and the believers are one nation. So they actually kind of, consider the disbelievers as friends of one another, which also comes from the Quran. It's pretty messed up. But they see Muslims as a nation, and this is also why they react so strongly and with so much hate when somebody leaves Islam. For example, I left Islam, and my family is not very murderous and aggressive and all that, but my father disowned me. My relationship with my mother is very strained now. Lots of people that I knew that I grew up with have turned their backs on me and no longer talk to me and all that. Because when you leave Islam, it's not just that you no longer believe or you have different aspirations and you just choose a different way. You turn your back on your people. You betray your nation. That's basically what it is when you leave Islam. That's how they view it. So if somebody leaves Islam, they are betraying the nation, they are betraying their friends, their family, which is why it is normally justified in Islam to execute them. So leaving Islam is punished with death. This is the reason why. And you don't really have such a system in Christianity. In Christianity, it's just faith. So when you have this whole issue in Islam that it's so deeply entrenched as an identity and a nationality, it's just not very easy to simply be convinced by something else and to put that aside, to put Islam aside. They want to hold on to Islam. They see it as the most important thing, no matter what you give them. Even if you give them riches and wonderful living and call them your own and integrate them into your society, they still hold on to Islam as the most important thing. They will take everything else as well and say, yeah, thanks, cool, we appreciate that. But they will still hold on to Islam. And Islam is very, very firm in that everyone must hold on to it exactly as it was. We are not to trust the disbelievers. The day will come and we will be held accountable, and we will either go to hell and be punished for everything that we have done, or we will be rewarded and go to heaven and have sex with virgins. And this is how it is. It is very different. You can't just disconnect people from this religion. It doesn't really work.
Even for the women, like when I look at the situation that women experience under Islam, even more like moderate forms, I have a hard time imagining being like, yeah, this is the life for me. Like, I just want to have less rights, essentially. I don't really see like the pull in. Like, do women feel this inculcated as men do? Because I can see for men, there's kind of this reinforcement structure and a lot of benefits, but for women, there's a lot less benefits other than the family ostracization, which I think would be a huge thing to kind of step over.
it is too difficult to handle for men and women. But I'm going to give you an example. In Afghanistan, there was a survey. I think the last one was taken within the last 10 years or so. A survey in which they ask women different questions. Among those questions was, does a man have the right to beat his wife? I think 92% of women said yes. So 92% of women in Afghanistan said yes. A man is absolutely in his right to beat his wife and should. And the reasons given are not stuff like if the woman becomes extremely unbearably hostile and does insanely crazy things. The reasons are things like if she overcooks the food, then the man has the right to beat her. If she goes outside without permission from the husband, then yes, he has the right to beat her. If he becomes too annoyed because she did this and that wrong, he has the right to beat her. So the vast majority of women in Afghanistan think that a man is justified in beating his wife. This is just this is the indoctrination. This is what people learn, and this is how they are indoctrinated. You will find very often that even in Western cultures, the women under Islam will be just as zealous about it as the men are.
So then what's the way to like broker peace? Because I don't think I don't know the answer. When I look at Israel, one of the interesting things, I went into Israel and I said, right now, my main thought is it's a really, really, really complicated war that I definitely don't know enough to make any sort of like prescription as to how to solve this problem, because it's really, really complicated and it's got centuries of history. And after 3 weeks and interviewing and talking to some of the leading experts on the Palestinian side and as well as the Israeli side, I feel like I walked away being like, yeah, it's a really, 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 really complicated war. And I don't really know the simple answer, because it's really, really hard to live alongside two groups of people that feel the same like claim to land, and one group that seems to be explicitly saying that they want to kill all of the others, with the support of their neighbors, right? Of the Palestinians with the support of Iranians and just the other neighboring Muslim countries.
Yeah. You have seen how Israelis are, right? Did you sense any kind of sentiment among the average Israeli of oh yeah, we totally need to just eradicate these people and then be done with it?
It's a lot more fringe. Like there are these sentiments. Like Ben Gvir is horrible. He sucks a lot. Yeah. I don't think anyone reasonable is defending Ben Gvir. And Netanyahu is selling out to radicals like this who won't put Orthodox in military. And Ben Gvir and like what's the group that they're a part of? It's changed names. The parties are so hard to keep track of because they change names constantly. Yeah. But essentially one of the right, they used to be called the Jewish Home, and they've changed parties like twice now.
I think it's Jewish Power or something. notsoErudite.
Yeah, I think Zionism might be in the name now. They were Jewish Power, and then they blended again like last year.
Okay.
Yeah. But anyways, they will say some things that are pretty explicitly, I would say, genocidal, at least ethnically cleansing, like explicitly. But it is pretty fringe. It is very fringe. It's definitely not like within the Israeli charter, which is something that I think a lot of people aren't comfortable. But I guess when I look at the situation, the answer to me can't be like, well, we have to kill all Muslim people. That's like obviously not the answer. I'm not willing to make that principle trade. So what is the answer? Like, how do we find peace with people who fundamentally, like, essentially what you and I are saying to Muslim people is, you're bad because you don't have liberal values, right? When we think our liberal values are better than your values. And I think fundamentally, I do think that, right? I think giving women rights, I think viewing spousal rape as bad, I think all of these things are just more good principles. They're better values. I want them for the world. How do you engage with people who basically disagree with that?
Well, so I specifically asked you about the Israeli people because there is a very, very big contrast, a very strong contrast between how Israelis are and how the other side is. If you engage with the other side, I don't know if you had the chance to engage with average Palestinian Arabs in the West Bank, for example.
Yeah,
their responses are generally pretty messed up. You can already see it in polls. You can see it in interviews of people who have gone down the street and who have talked to them. You have seen many of them say, everybody here thinks we should just, we should collect them and get rid of all of them and so on. And this was the general sentiment in Gaza. The Gazans before the war learned that in the near future, we are supposed to mobilize and somehow make it happen that we take control of all the territory and then eradicate the Jews entirely and take control of this land, and all of it will be ours. Like, nobody thinks like that in Israel, except for a very fringe.
I will say, when I was getting interviewed, so when I was interviewing Palestinians in the West Bank area, we had a translator. The translator midway through got told to stop translating in Arabic, I'm pretty sure, because he stopped translating as directly, but the language use was pretty extreme, right? They basically said, well, we asked about like the settlers, which they hate, obviously, which they called like dirty animals, creatures. They never referred to them as people. And then I was like, well, how do you feel about like people in Tel Aviv? Because a lot of Tel Aviv citizens are very opposed to the settlers. I actually think that what the settlers are doing in B areas particularly are doing something really harmful and agitating against peace, right? That's what most Tel Aviv citizens that I spoke to believed. And they were like, yeah, they're just like less dirty versions of the settlers, but they're all like dirty. And then our translator actually explicitly our translator was told by the person touring us to stop translating directly. I'm about 90% sure. So we're going to have to like go back and get everything retranslated. And
that makes sense.
I'm going to give the steel man, okay? Because I don't know if I agree with this, but well, I don't. I know that I don't agree with this. A lot of people would look at that and go, it's hard to not hate a group of people that have like oppressed you for 77 years. Like, okay, he calls them a dirty dog and creatures and stuff like that. On the flip side, Israeli settlers are stealing their land. And to be fair, I didn't talk to any Jordanians. I didn't get a chance to go to any of these other countries for numerous reasons.
So
one of them being safety.
Right? So you don't actually think that Israelis were oppressing or taking or stealing their land or anything?
I think the settler stuff is it's fucked up. I think the lack of freedom of mobility in A areas is super harmful. I really do think that the West Bank situation is basically ramping up. Like, if you want peace with these people, the recipe to make them never want to have peace with you would have the settler situation the way that it is, essentially. At the same time, 77 years ago, when peace and lines were offered, they were rejected outright and war was immediately triggered, right? And so I would say like I'm 75% pro-Israel and 25% critical of Israel. I don't even know how you have a two-state solution cleanly when the borders now that will be drawn for Palestine is just not livable.
It's not possible anymore.
It's not even livable. Possible. Yeah, it's not even livable. And I don't even know how you have peace between these two nations.
Here is the thing. So the Jewish side, the Zionist Israeli side, prior to 1948 was all about somehow trying to find a solution to live together. They had this naive idea. They were just like Europeans. They were kind of stupid about it. They had this naive and stupid idea that we can, if we just go there and we just, build stuff and we just, make everything wonderful, the Arab side, they will get to know us and they will be okay with us over time and we will just live together. It didn't quite work that way.
Are you saying that was the Zionist approach in like the 1910s?
Yeah, that was the Zionist approach.
I don't know if I could agree to that framing. I don't know if it was just as like, we'll just go and be chill. They bought land legally. And then they said, we're not fucking with Arabs. And they had I think the Zionists were a little more edgy than that. They were just like, man, we're going to bring peace and love and daisies.
In the 40s, in the 30s and 40s, they became increasingly skeptical and increasingly, defensive against the Arabs. I guess if I
would actually say rightfully in the 20s and 30s. Yeah. I would say though by like even the 1892. I believe that's when like the Zionist idea of like only hired Jews came from. So they buy the land from landlords, right, that don't live there, mostly Lebanese landlords. And then all of a sudden, all these Arab tenant farmers are displaced. And they're like, we're not hiring them. We're only hiring Jews because we want money to recirculate back into the Jewish people. So it was a little more edgy. It was a little more edgy.
The thing is,
that doesn't mean you get to kill them.
But was it really injustice? Because as I was saying this, I was actually talking about. I guess I could rephrase that, but I was actually talking about the initial mindset of Zionism. But even later on, because Zionism was very much led at that time by leftist socialist currents that kind of had a very different understanding of society and of Middle Eastern cultures, and they were very, very, very liberal and tolerant toward those cultures, although they weren't always, ready to just be, become part of the family together with the Arabs. So they had the approach of the early Zionist approach was, we will go there, we will establish stuff, and we will get along. Like Theodor Herzl, this was his whole idea, and he was an awesome guy, and I admire him a lot. But he also had a really, really dumb idea of how society will develop. He wrote a whole book, The Old New Land, in which he envisions this utopia where the Arabs and Jews live together because everything goes so well, and the Arabs and the Jews are like, oh, remember how we used to distrust each other and now we are friends and all that. It's so ridiculous. It's like a novel.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at like the early kind of like, especially like the European settlers, but in general, basically Jews fleeing pogroms. That's the main group of people that were settling the land and buying it legally. Less legally once the Ottoman Empire stopped letting them buy the land, but it was still technically legally. They would just like go through like a broker instead of directly.
Here's the thing. So much of it was like done. So when they displace people who live on the land, right? So they go there, they purchase land, and on the land lives and works an Arab family.
Yeah.
At that time, nobody called them Palestinians. So an Arab family. The Arab family then, the Jews that arrived say, okay, we bought the land. It now belongs technically to us, and we bought it specifically because we want to settle the land and, build it again. So they say those tenants that are currently staying there, whether they are paying or not, as sad as it is, they have to go because we have to take over now. But those who are there don't want to go because it's their home and it's their business and their life and all that. So they say, well, I'm sorry, but we bought it, and it's, we are in charge now, so you have to go. Sorry.
I mean, I
builds resentment.
It builds resentment, and
it's something wrong, but
they didn't, right? And this is one of the tricky things, because when you look at the early settlement of Jewish people in the ancestral Palestine land in the Middle East, where they would call like Judea and Samaria in the northern and southern kingdom, et cetera, we know the area. I would say it was all legitimate, right? I don't think, even in America, like if we tried to convert this to like America, if a bunch of people start buying land in America and settling there and settling legally in the way that the immigration was much more open, obviously, back then, what right do we have? We don't get to go and kill them now. We don't get to like run up if a bunch of Swedes buy land in like barren Texas, because it was really like the lands. Mark Twain always writes about like how shitty the lands were, right? Like these aren't like ideal lands. They're not these amazing soils to grow riches from. It's the desert. It's desert and sub-desert areas. You don't get to run up and kill them. But I also have this flip of being like, how would America feel if America gets dumpstered in World War I? It falls apart. So the American people don't really have the Ottoman Empire anymore. Now they're like a scattered group. And then the British take over. I can understand the frustration as like, the Swedes, say in this case, the Swedes keep taking more land, all legitimately, all legally, but they won't let a single fucking American work in it. No way. Get out. We don't hate you. You can do your own thing, but we're not interested in working with you in any way. I can see the resentment building where I go, I don't know what those displaced Americans do. I don't know what that displaced American group looks like 50 years down the road. Maybe it looks like rebuilding. Maybe that's the biggest issue, is essentially you go, at some point you have to rebuild, right? Whereas the Arab and later Palestinian answer was, we will kill them and take back the land. We will kill them and take back the land. And we will not negotiate with anything. We will only kill them and take back the land. There's no negotiation here. So this is why I'm mostly pro-Israel, right? At the same time, is there an occupation happen? Yeah, I just don't think it's been for 77 years.
No, much less. And the thing is, so the Arab side, the first thing that the Israeli side did in terms of any military developments prior to the establishment of Israel, what the Zionist side did was to simply establish a force that is just meant to be fully defensive. So they only had as much defense as they need. They wanted to establish to protect themselves from aggressions by the Arab side. But the Arab side became very, very aggressive from very early on. In the early 20s, and in 1929, a huge massacre happened. Hebron was emptied of Jews. In the 1930s, massacres happened. At the same time, in the late 30s, early 40s, the guy who was the de facto leader of the Palestinian Arabs, Haj Amin al-Husseini, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem.
The Grand Mufti, yeah.
Literally went and befriended Mussolini, and then met with Hitler and with Heinrich Himmler, and they both made very big promises to him. And Hitler promised to him directly. It's in the German records. Hitler promised to him directly. He said, once we are done with, once we have defeated the Bolsheviks and the British, we will descend into Arabia, and once we are there, you will be the primary sole figure responsible for the Arabs, and you will be my partner, and then we will eliminate or eradicate the final element of the Jewish race under the British forces. So in the land of Arabia. So Hitler's plan, as he promised it to the Mufti, was to go there and finish off the last Jews left and eradicate them. So and the Arab side was fine with it. The Arab side went to civil war.
They wanted
in
it.
The 30s.
The Mufti was like telling Hitler, like, bring more of them, bring more Jews, immigrate them to Palestine so that they're all in one spot, so we can
collect them here, so we can kill them all.
Yeah.
So in the 40s, the Arab side very much went to civil war with the idea it's time to eradicate the Jews. The time has come. The prophecies are being fulfilled. In 47 and 48, finally, the buildup of resentment was answered by the Arab side by inviting all the Arab nations to declare an extermination war against the Jews, and with the final goal of eradicating them entirely and then settling the land, and not even building a Palestinian Arab state or anything, but rather to unite it with Egypt and Syria and to build a huge Arab union. So along all of that, the Israeli side did nothing except try to somehow find peace and try to find a peaceful solution, to integrate part of the population and teach them about living together and about Zionism and coexist. It never worked. The other side never really wanted it. After 48, Gaza and the West Bank were mostly occupied by Egypt and Jordan. Israel wasn't in charge. In the 67 and 72 later on, Israel gradually took control, and Israel was actually the force that for the first time gave autonomy, self-governance, a taste of autonomy to those Palestinian Arab people when they gave the West Bank the right to have their own government and to draw their own borders and to make their own constitutions. As much as it was a pathetic attempt. They gave Gaza, for the first time, as bad as it was, any ounce of autonomy. They never had that under Egypt or under Jordan. Jordan even had the long-term plan to just annex the West Bank. They never even intended to let it go or anything. They had it annexed, and they wanted the Palestinian West Bank people to become citizens of Jordan. That was their plan.
Sure. I find the autonomy argument for Palestinians a little unsatisfying.
I agree.
Okay. So in Israel, they'll often point to Gaza and be like, see, we let them try. We gave them 20 years for autonomy and they fucked it up. And I'm like, well, not really. Like, everything was highly regulated. At this point, you had 60 some years of rampant rage against one another, settlers moving in increasingly into their land. So you've got at least a century and a half of like hatred. And then after that, you've got super regulated borders, Egypt on one side, Israel on the other side, and both sides are very tightly regulating what's going in and out. There's no port, there's no airport, and I understand the reasons why they didn't allow either of these two things, right? Which is, there's no way that they're having an airport. There's just
it's all justified.
Yeah, there's no way. There's no way
because this was the natural result of the whole of decades of hate and aggressions. They built a wall to stop the constant firing at Israeli civilians from the West Bank, and it actually solved the problem. So the thing is, fast forward, honestly, very, very honestly, I went there as well. I talked to many people as well. You went there as well. You just like me see that there simply doesn't seem to be any realistic solution to the conflict. I think that the only solution is very, very simple, which is to, in a humanitarian way, relocate most of the population that is in Gaza and in the West Bank. It is very, very much hated.
It'll be bloody. It'll never happen.
Very hated, but this is the only solution. Long term, any other solution will only bring more pain and suffering.
The issue is that's not even a reasonable solution because you've got a democracy trying to relocate people. So the moment Netanyahu tries to mobilize soldiers to relocate people, because they're not going to go peacefully in any way, it will become necessarily violent. Voters don't like it when their soldiers die. So Netanyahu's going to lose power, and all that will happen is a new guard will come in that's like, yeah, we're not doing that fucking shit, right? And so it's like even this idea of essentially ethnic cleansing, because that's essentially what it is, moving this ethnicity entirely out of the area into like Jordan, for example. The issue is that will be fundamentally bloody, right? It must be bloody.
Plus, it will lead to terrorism again because it will start building terrorist cells. Again.
Yep, in Jordan and Syria. I don't know. Have you ever spoken to Einat Wilf?
Yeah, I did. She's awesome.
She's amazing. I don't know if she's ever talked to you. So she told us about her peace plan.
Yeah,
and
I interviewed her actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Has she told you her peace plan about collaborator spaces and stuff?
Remind me.
Okay, so she's very big on this idea how essentially she thinks as well that the B areas particularly are extremely agitative. It's essentially creating a recipe by which Palestinians will never accept the PA or any other authority that's in any way like erected. In large part because Hamas has been more effective at getting what Palestinians want than the PA has. The PA has not successfully negotiated hostage exchanges. The PA has not successfully negotiated increased aid. It's done nothing except lose land. Whereas Hamas has at least done damage to the Jews and gotten hostages released. I think the B area, so Einat Wilf is like, you got to roll them back. You got to clap down on them a lot. And then you need to create essentially collaborator spaces that are protected by a third party that isn't Israel or Palestine, but a neutral third party that's doing some sort of protection so that people who want to just live peacefully and are comfortable like renouncing terrorism essentially can live there and exist there and essentially earn more rights, especially if there's a pathway towards citizenship within Israel. That's the only thing that I see as potentially working. Because we have to have an off-ramp for the extremism, because right now we have a breeding ground for it.
The thing is, I see where she's coming from, and I see how that is a plan. But the thing is, doesn't that once again lead to strict control over a big chunk of the population, and therefore to complaints of being oppressed or occupied and all that, because it will come with severe restrictions in terms of movement and organization and all that. So
it will. So at a PR level, I would agree it's a losing fight for Israel. The issue is that I think if you try to physically remove Palestinians, you are inciting war. There will be another war. The Arab nations will not stand for that. There's no way.
Honestly, I think the Arab nations are too. Despite everything that we have experienced over the last 2 years, the UAE and even Saudi Arabia still seem to have a tendency, as of late, to just move forward with attempts to establish, or the UAE already has, but the other Arab nations to establish relations with Israel and to somehow find diplomatic solutions in the long term. Because there were also polls in which you can see that the majority of Muslim and Arab nations except for the Palestinians, of course, say that fighting is not a solution in the long term. We have to find diplomatic solutions with Israel. This was not the same in like 50 years ago. Most of them were very hostile toward Israel, but they are more likely to now just engage politically with Israel
because of economic ties. Like even like the Egypt natural gas pipeline that they set up is a guarantee for peace in a large way.
I mean, and Egypt has been in a long-term collaboration with Israel already, in that they have also blockaded Gaza because they know how problematic it is, and they have worked together with Israel and the global community in actually keeping Gaza shut off. It's very funny. Nobody ever talks about this, but Egypt also has them blockaded. But so here's.
But they're pissed about Gaza. They're really mad. We talked as well to the diplomat to Egypt, and they basically have shut down communications because the agreement was that the Rafah Gate would stay under Egyptian and Palestinian control, because Egypt is still very pro the Arab nations. They're still pro-Palestinian, and so they're mad. Like, I don't even know if they're talking right now. Last I heard is that they're not talking. They're refusing to talk to Israel, which is not a good sign.
Yeah, the relations are very, very strained. But the thing is, you know what Egypt did to their side of Rafah. So part of Rafah is on the Egyptian side of the border. They flattened it. They destroyed it. It became an uninhabitable zone, basically. In response and as a consequence of the so-called Palestinian activities in Egypt. In Egypt, there's kind of this funny attitude of, yes, we stand with or we feel for the Palestinians, but we also don't really want anything to do with them, because when the Palestinians were in Egypt, they caused nothing but trouble. When they were present on the other side of the border, they killed Egyptian soldiers and engaged in terrorism and dragged Egypt into senseless death and war and destruction. So the thing is, as much of the world stands with the Palestinian population, many of the nations around the world also are very hesitant to lift a finger to actually do something when they are in trouble. And I think that Israel at some point has to take some drastic measures and do it carefully, without it resulting in bloodbaths, and find a permanent solution to the problem. Because my solution would be to just annex the entire land and make all of it part of Israel. But if they do that, then they have to give citizenship and the right to vote to those people that are in there. And if they do that, that is suicide. You can't do that. So you have to peacefully and in a good way relocate much of the population. And I'm not saying this is a realistic solution. I'm not saying this is a simple solution or something that will happen, but I think it's the only solution that is remotely realistic. Anything else just seems implausible.
I think the issue is I don't think there's even a country that would be willing to take them, right? Like most countries, even if they're willing to work with Israel, agree that Palestine land is for the Palestinians. They don't want them in Jordan. They don't want them in Egypt. Although there is about 300,000 Palestinians that I believe are refugees within Egypt. But they're very big on maintaining the refugee status, right? Even within Egypt, I believe most of the people that were moved from Palestine into Egypt are still considered refugees, with the idea that they should be not rehomed, because usually refugees in a country will be rehomed within the country. The idea is that they essentially pass down the refugee status because where they're going to be rehomed is where modern day Israel is. That's the idea, is my understanding.
That is also a very big part of the problem. Most of the population in Gaza still has refugee status today. And what that implies is that they are supposed to, at some point, retake much of the land that is indefinitely under Israeli control, and supposed to resettle there and supposed to move back there. This is a ridiculous idea. It is one of the main reasons why this conflict is still ongoing. This whole refugee status that the United Nations upholds. I mean, you have entire cities in Gaza that were booming before the war. that were regular cities that are known as refugee camps. When you hear the word refugee camp, you would think of some crappy tent place or something. It's a regular city with jewelers and all kinds of things. And it's called a refugee camp because it was established for refugees and has developed into a city. And most of the population there comes from people who were displaced during the 1948 war. And they are given this empty and false promise that one day in the future, the land will be taken back or they will be able to resettle there. It's not going to happen. But as long as that idea is upheld, there is always a sentiment of hostility and of endless, perpetual war against Israel. It has to stop.
Do you think this is obviously not a solution for now because we're 70 years ahead of this, but do you think that when Herschel and like the whole Zionist movement was looking for a land, do you think that I understand why they went to the Middle East and where they are and whatnot, but should they have just gone to like empty lands in Mongolia? Like, why? It feels a little wild to choose to go to an area literally surrounded by like your religious enemy who like wants to kill you, even though you have historical ties to it, because the historical ties are by and large centuries old, excluding obviously the Arab Jews that were still living there.
The funny thing is, so I'm not sure if you've read this, but in his thing, A Jewish State here, where he basically introduces that whole idea, he talks about it and he proposes two places to go to. One of them is Argentina, and one of them is, as he calls it, the historic Palestine, the land of Israel, where we are supposed to live and go back to. And he had no religious motivations behind this. Like, the guy was completely secular. He had no religious ideas at all.
Yeah. Uganda was talked about too, I think.
Yeah. And but the idea was generally that the most likely solutions would be Argentina, which would be open to Jews settling there and building something good. But the most probable one would be the historic land of Israel, to go there and to resettle. And he actually brings this whole thing up, that the population there is pretty bad, if you want to call it that. And he says...
bad as in like hostile to Jews?
Yeah. But he also... I'm trying to remember the words he uses, but he says that it would be a front of civilization in a barbaric environment, basically. So... And he says that we can bring the toleration and the development that we have learned in Europe to that place and build something good there, and also be partners in the long term with European nations with whom we have much in common and with whom we have exchanged a lot of knowledge and culture and all that. So this is his whole idea. But the idea is basically we will resettle the land. We will be a front for civilization, for European civilization. Of course, the religious factions disagreed with that very much. And his dumb idea was kind of, the Arabs will understand when they see how we are,
It's very white colonial. I think when the Ottoman Empire looks at the Jewish people coming in and listens to Herschel and identifies them as basically white colonial invaders looking to set up a camp within the Middle East to like basically destroy the Ottoman Empire from the inside out, was probably semi-founded. Not so much about the level of like, I don't think Britain was as interested in like that collusion level necessarily, and the Ottoman Empire was on the last dregs of its life. It was like in its death throes. But it is very colonial to say we'll go in and teach these savages the way to be, essentially.
That's true. And he did adopt a very European mindset. And the thing is, so it's basically recorded that when he was coming up with this whole idea of reestablishing the Jewish homeland, most Jews thought he was crazy. And he even addresses this and says, and you will ridicule me for proposing this, but I tell you that this is entirely possible. So it's kind of funny to talk about it today, because we have a very, very an awesome state of Israel that is a world leader in so many fields of human development. But just a little bit over 100 years ago, he was describing this as he was trying to convince people that this can totally happen and is totally not an unrealistic dream. So But he did have a European mindset with which he thought, oh, like we are all humans. We all have this. We all learn and we all adapt and so on. And those people, they just don't know better. And if we just go there and we establish our way, those people will see that we are good and they will no longer be hostile. And we will live together and they will learn from us and they will benefit. So it is a very naive mindset, and probably also one of the main reasons why we are where we are right now.
Yeah.
But this is just how things happened.
So I'm curious, one of the things, actually, let me back up. What do you think Americans and most kind of Western democracies don't understand about Islam? What are some like key things that you think are misunderstood? And why do they know so little about it when they care about like all of these countries so much?
Well, people don't know much about their own religion.
That's true.
So it's not really expected that they know much about the other religion. But what shocks me more is that Europeans don't know very much about Islam, and they should, because Europe basically spent 1,000 years nearly fighting off Islam. And it's kind of wild that they completely forgot about this and moved on and started becoming so accepting. But
do you think
I think what they need...
Oh, I'm so sorry. Do you think when they abandoned Christian power connection to politics, that they essentially assumed that the wars with like Middle Eastern areas and more Muslim countries would end because it was essentially religious? And so we're secular now, so there's enough need to fight with Islam because we're not religious. We don't care about this shit.
I think that was a big part of it, because so much of the secularization in Europe and throughout the West was... So the idea was, for centuries, we have fought religious wars. And especially after the Protestant Reformation, Europe spent many centuries in bloody conflicts and trying to get rid of control over each other, coming up with the solution of just secularizing the state and massacring all the religious authorities, which happened in France, for example. But they thought we are all, humans who have killed each other for no reason over religious conflicts. If we get rid of that, we will have peace. And it worked in a sense in Europe when we are talking about just Christians. But it doesn't really work that way when you...
Well, sort of. Sort of. I mean, there was like Anglican and like Catholic and Protestant fighting in the UK for pretty recently. Like, when did the Irish infighting end?
It never really ended, but it mostly ended in, I think, when was that? Like
80s or 90s?
80s, 90s, yeah. I was going to say the same thing, yeah.
Yeah.
80s, 90s is when they officially kind of disbanded, but then there's still a small part that continued with their terrorism and all that, but I think that's pretty much over too now.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that was one of those spots where the fighting still continued, but mostly, for the most part, Christians made peace with each other and thought, come on, man, we fought each other and killed each other for centuries. Let's stop. That's all very, very good, all very nice. But now you have a different religion that's not quite like Christianity. It's not just about, doing the right thing this way or doing the right thing that way, or, it's a completely fundamentally different religion. And Western people fail to understand this. They fail to understand that Islam is not just a faith. It is a nation, an empire. It is political. That's what it is. We have Muslim scholars and apologists today saying that that they're making good progress and that they are supposed to take over more Western nations so that in the future they can re-establish the Islamic Caliphate. I'm not even joking. Like, there is Adnan Rashid is one name, for example. He's a popular Islamic teacher in the UK. He just recently gave a speech where he said that the long-term goal of Muslims everywhere should be to establish at least 3 prime ministers in European countries, so that they have control over the politics of the nation, and then to rebuild what has been lost, which is the Islamic Empire, which was crushed by force by Western people. So the Muslims are not done with the whole fighting. They're just waiting to get back to it.
And this is tied, in your view, fundamentally, like, because I feel like you listen to certain American Muslims that are very liberal, that are very like that's, I think, what is it? The law of abrogation, they'll often cite and be like, yeah, it's like not, there's like some teachings that are really, really aggressive and violent and stuff, but it's not, it's not the same.
Yeah, the thing is, American Muslims are the most disconnected and the least Islamic, according to Pew Research, which I guess comes with moving away from the Islamic world and being so disconnected from the larger Muslim community and all that. The other Muslim societies around the world are much more in line with traditional Islamic thinking, but the majority of Muslims still believe today that that Islam should be that politics should be run with Islam. So the majority of Muslims, according to Pew Research, across the Muslim world agrees that Sharia should be the official rule of law, which means Islamic law. So the most Muslims in the world are against democracy. No other group thinks like this. Christians are mostly for democracy in the world.
So then
Muslims are mostly for Sharia in the world and for strict rules, for banning blasphemy, for punishing apostasy, and so on. 0% when it was asked in the UK, where integration completely went wrong. I think more than 50% of the Muslim population thinks that homosexuality should be banned, for example. I mean, good luck. Good luck if that population gains more traction. You won't just have some people here and there who have strong opinions like Christians do. You will have people who actually want to interfere and ban things and brutally physically punish you.
So then do you feel really similar then about like the emerging Orthodox Christian theocrats? Like there's like this emerging zealous religious right that is Christian in nature, like Andrew Wilson or Jay Dyer, who are unironically advocating for a Christian theocracy that would unquestionably punish gay people, would take away women's rights to vote. They have there's a lot of right infringements that they're advocating for that would be similar to, not identical, but similar to some of your concerns about Sharia law. Like, do you feel similar about these two groups?
Not really. I mean, considering that we have like maybe one or two people who also think like Jay Dyer, so it's not a very serious force, it's not a very serious movement that will overtake the nation or anything. Most people, as much as they want to have some religion in government on the right, still want to uphold the separation of church and state on a fundamental level and don't want to turn it into a theocracy. There are some minor movements among Christians who would engage in such things. Even those wouldn't have remotely the support needed to even be visible within society. And even if they established something Christian, and I'm not saying it would be great as a theocracy, but we had it in history, and it was never remotely as bad as Islam.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I look at like Peter Thiel and Musk, I have a hard time. I do not think that these are identical. I would never compare Islam to Christianity because they're fundamentally different religions. But I don't know if I buy you saying that they don't have like that they're basically unserious movements. Probably the more extreme versions of it, right? Like the Andrew Wilsons and whatnot. But at the same time, I mean, he's got an increasingly popular YouTube channel. He's got thousands of people that tune in and cite him and seem to agree with his version of Eastern Orthodoxy. But also you've got behind the scenes, you've got Musk and Thiel, who are sedevacantvists, who seem to increasingly maybe support this idea of an erosion of democracy, in part for their benefits as like technocrats, but also because they think essentially that Western civilization is falling to liberal hedonism. They point at trans people, they point at gay people. So I don't know if I buy that it has less will behind it. It just has a different type of will. But I would say if you look at America, we're seeing the Constitution like actively being attacked, like the foundations of our democracy kind of being actively attacked. It's probably grown by thousands of percent since last year.
The thing is, I don't know how this is going to sound. But I honestly often don't really take the concerns of American politics very seriously, because I don't think that there is a. I know that this is very important to people who focus mostly on U.S. politics. I know that you would feel very strongly about this as well. I think that the vast majority of stuff that is going on in the U.S. in terms of political, divergence from the mainstream and possible, dangers to the Constitution or the system as we have it, I think most of it is just is a non-issue. It's a nothing burger. I don't think there's much to worry about, and I'm personally not worried about it at all. And we spent every election talking about how if this candidate doesn't get elected, then this is the end of America. And then the next election come and we talk about if this one is not elected, then this is the end of America. The next election we say if the other one is elected, then this is the end of America. It's always the same narrative. And you have trends here and there of people trying to ban certain things or trying to, moralize and say we need to get back to, allowing only these people to go to bathrooms or only these people to vote and all that. Much of it is just talk and just empty frenzy and fear mongering. I think that we have a very, very well established system in America. If in the future at some point a civil war breaks out or the country is nuked and somehow divided into different pieces, I guess we can worry more about what's going to happen. But as it stands right now, I don't think that there's much to worry about, honestly.
That's really interesting. So I would agree that there is a tendency on both sides within the parties to be alarmist. When Biden got elected, it was the end of democracy. When Trump got elected the first time, the thing that makes me, so I don't know if I would believe that democracy would end in the next 2 years, 3 years. I do see a concern about the erasure of democracy, because I think this is the first time, for example, where like birthright citizenship, which is like pretty central to like the Constitution, I think it's the 14th Amendment, is like actively being written out by an executive. Like I do think that this is dissimilar. I think that in 2016, what I view history as, I'll be concise. What I view history as is in 2016, we had this legitimate issue where essentially there was derangement syndrome around Trump. I think that he was kind of an asshole. He was a very non-classic politician, but by and large wasn't too crazy or radical. People were extremely, extremely rabid about him, which made him bitter, which made people more bitter towards the left. And his presidency was like, not great. It was okay.
Yeah.
COVID happens, Biden gets in, probably in part because people were a little bit sick of Trump, like really trying to shake the boat a lot. But more importantly, COVID happened and nobody was happy with their incumbent in COVID. Biden gets into party and all of a sudden we're like, yay, we solved it. And people are, I would say, even more rabid on the left. There's a lot of pushing on left policies that were bad. And then Trump gets in 2024. And a lot of leftists are saying, see, we knew he was a Nazi the whole time. And my concern is, I think you guys made him into this. I think like this is the consequence of your politic from 2016 to 2022 of canceling and moral, religious, secular behavior and all sorts of things that I think are very yucky and icky. But I do look at deportations of people without due process as different than before, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I would have disagreements about some of the policies under the Trump administration. That said, I would also say that one remarkable aspect about the Trump administration is that it's it's an extremely disappointing administration in terms of all the unfulfilled big promises that were made, and also all the unfulfilled fear mongering that was made. So much of it is just is again empty talk. I mean, he, for example, he said that when he's elected within like 48 hours or something, 24 hours, he will bring a deal to the Ukraine-Russia war. Obviously, nonsense. It's been what, half a year now?
Yeah. But also, he said he would do tariffs. And everyone thought he was lying because they're like, he's making that shit up. He's making, and then he was not making that shit up.
Yeah, but much of it was then just diplomatically implemented in order to get a reaction. And we have some of it implemented, most of it exaggerated in order to get deals with different nations done, for example. But I don't know. It's just, so the issue is we can talk about America and where it's going for the longest time. I just I don't really concern myself too much with it. And I also think that from the religious aspect, I think the religious aspect is not very important, considering that you might have a few extreme voices here and there in favor of Christianity, for example, but they're usually not supported by the larger community of Christians or by the larger community of clergymen. In Catholicism, clergy is overwhelmingly on the side of non-intervention and separation of church and state. The same thing is true for Orthodox Christians as well. As much as there are these extreme voices on the internet, the same thing is true for Protestants. So even if you have some extreme voices in America or anywhere else that want to turn things religious and turn it into a theocracy and make religion take over, you will never have wider support within the Christian religion after this point anymore. You still have that in Islam. This is why Islam is always fundamentally different from Christianity.
So essentially, if I'm understanding you, you feel that there's a ceiling to the theocrats, the Christian theocrats. Yeah. There's because I'm sure you'd probably agree, there's thousands more of them, at least vocal, than there were like 3 years ago. I don't think we really know.
I mean, I see them more often now, but I'm not sure if the number has increased or anything.
Okay, interesting.
I think that they're more vocal recently, as you say, but I'm not sure if they have increased in numbers. I honestly don't know the answer to this, and I don't really see a very clear rise in numbers of those people.
Gotcha. Okay, so you don't you see them as a fringe element, probably bad for Christianity because they definitely don't make us look great. But that's about it, essentially.
Yeah, and if you go outside, how many people do you meet who say, "Oh yeah, we should totally turn this country into a Christian nation"? Like nobody.
In Florida, unfortunately, more than I would have expected.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not all of them, but there's a lot of them that are like, you know what, democracies. I think there's a sentiment that democracy is failing. And I think as democracy fails, people will be looking for an alternative. And I would be concerned about how many Protestant Christians I could see shifting to being like, well, if democracy is failing us, is there another system that might serve us better? And Christian nationalism, I wonder, could be the answer that they look for. I don't look at our democracy now in our country and take for granted that we'll have it in 10 years necessarily.
There's a funny aspect to all of this, which is that the founding fathers, many of them in America, have explicitly said that having Christian values or certain virtues is pretty much essential to upholding this system that we are building here, and that if in this republic, the wider or the general population, most of the population no longer has the general virtues that we value so much, then this will fall apart. So what they were basically hinting at is, or explaining, is that if you lose these values that we all together cherished, then people will start getting more and more divided, and this will lead to a great rift in democracy, which will come naturally, and people will start becoming disappointed in democracy and will try to replace it. So their prophecy and their explanation of it is very much, and they were smart people, They said these things for very good reasons. They actually understood what they were advocating for when they built this republic. So yeah, I mean, I think it's not necessarily unexpected that people would be in the long term disappointed with our current democratic system once society in general changes into a radically different direction. And right now, this is happening. Whether you agree with them or disagree with them, the modern liberal progressive mindset is very, very different from the virtues and values that established the republic. So naturally, and they're also very different from the values most of the population holds. So naturally, if they influence politics in this country more, this leads more to disappointment and division within the larger society. Maybe things have to change in the future. Maybe we have to establish a system where, I don't know, we have some kind of system where not everyone votes, but we have some kind of a meritocracy, if you want to call it that, where you have to go through an education and an academic system in order to be part of politics. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That would be cool. I'll be a fan of that.
Yeah. Don't know if the right would be a fan of that. That would be their like worst nightmare. They would hate that. Oh, I lost you for a second. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, right? With democracy, when you like pose the question of, okay, well, like maybe not everyone should get to vote. Then the question is who gets to decide who gets to vote, which is fundamentally a very undemocratic question.
That's true.
Do you see, for example, in your concern about like Muslim religion, do you see if democracy is starting to like fall apart and shatter? Particularly, I don't know how much you blame it on social media. I blame it a lot on social media. If you see the fall of it, are you worried in America that like a Sharia law would pop up or be competitive in any way, or would you be more worried about that just for European countries, or not at all?
I would be worried for European countries. In fact, I think it's pretty reasonable to expect that that in the UK there will probably be in the future some kind of attempt by the larger Muslim community to establish their own little country on the British Isles and to have a separatist Islamic movement that claims London as their capital or something like that. Totally possible. Totally possible. I don't think it's fear-mongering at all. I think it very much goes into that direction where there would be a civil war or some division, either try to impose Islam and Islamic rules onto the UK or to create a separate nation on the British Isles. Things like that could also happen in different European countries. I don't think that we have anything to fear in that direction in America. That said, there have recently been attempts to establish Islamic communities and towns in Texas, for example. There are towns in the Midwest that have become very Islamic, where you can now hear the call to prayer announced every day, which is pretty wild, in my opinion. I wouldn't think that's possible, but we have that situation. So I don't want to be too optimistic, but I would say that in America we are very, very far away from any such thing. Gotcha. Because Muslims are a very tiny part of the population, and Americans are very unlike Europeans in terms of trusting others.
Could you tell me about Taqiya?
Oh boy. So, what do you want to know about it?
Well, I'll tell you my understanding and you correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
So my understanding is obviously there's going to be different interpretations of Taqiya. Some I've heard more liberal interpretations would be essentially this idea that you can lie about your faith to keep yourself safe. So like Anne Frank could lie and say she's not Jewish so that she doesn't get killed. And I've heard other much more extreme interpretations that would essentially say you can lie so long as it's furthering the Muslim agenda. So you can lie about the faith, you can lie about what you believe in, you can lie about like your goals and desires, so long as it makes it look better to people who don't understand it. Again, as long as the goal is furthering the faith.
Yeah, so It's very funny considering that I am somebody who has spent many years critiquing Islam. Lots of people who are on my side would normally expect me to, go into the whole hard direction of saying, yeah, Taqiya is just this, this card that Muslims hold, which allows them to lie and say whatever they want. It's not really true.
Yeah,
we have to be truthful about it. So in history, Taqiya was used by both Sunni Muslims and Shia Muslims in different contexts. It was mostly used among Shia Muslims and among other heretical little sects within Islam. And it was generally that, especially among the Shia Muslims, it was known as a as a very, very popular thing, because they were oppressed by the Sunni Muslims, not by non-Muslims, but by the Sunni Muslims. So they were taught by their authorities, if you are asked if you're Sunni or Shia, you're allowed to say you're Sunni in order to save yourself. Or if you are asked a question about, I don't know, the Muhammad's family or Ali, and these things that are kind of the differences between Sunni and Shia, you can lie in order to protect your Shia identity, so in order to not get killed. So this was the general Shia idea. But later on, this developed very much into different directions. Like throughout Shia history, they took that as an excuse and broadened the use of it to deception, not just when your life is in immediate danger, but in preachings in general and all that. And the Sunni side also did some of that here and there. Now, here's the thing: I would not say that Taqiya is a very popular Muslim concept, which Muslims popularly use in order to lie to people. I don't think. I know that this is not a thing. Personally, when I was a Muslim, I barely ever heard of such a thing called Taqiya. That said, we don't have to call it Taqiya. Muslims have different ways of which allow them to be a little bit not fully upfront or not fully honest about the religion. For example, if you are, according to Muhammad, if you are fighting the enemies of Islam, then you are supposed to be deceptive toward them. And the traditional Islamic understanding has always been that those who speak or, fight against Islam, be it physically or verbally or through propaganda or in any other way, are the enemies of Islam. So when you deal with the enemies of Islam, you are allowed to be deceptive. So when Muslims deal with non-Muslim nations, with disbelieving nations, they are basically engaging with the enemies of Islam in a way, those who rejected Islam. This normally gives them a pass to be deceptive when they do preachings, or they can omit certain truths in order to make people more comfortable about Islam. They can break agreements and break treaties and things like that in order to advance the cause of Islam. So these are things that are part of Islam. Muslims can be deceptive, and they do have permission to do that. But it is often unrelated to the concept of Taqiya, which is slightly different.
Gotcha. Okay. So how does that differ? So I'm not sure actually the Orthodox perspective on this, but at least within like fundamental Christianity, I grew up talking about evangelism. There's different like strategies to evangelism. And so there was this idea, for example, that when you teach people about your faith as a Protestant, you start people on like what we call like the milk and honey. So you start them on things like God loves you, you're forgiven, he wants good things for you, kind of like the peace, love, easy to swallow stuff that everyone likes. And then they say, as they get indoctrinated into the faith and they come further and further, that's when you hit them with what we call like the meat of the faith. So tough questions like hell, questions like sin, things like this. Is that similar to what you're describing? Like how similar are these things?
No, because so what you're describing is also exists in Islam. I also engaged in preaching Islam when I was a Muslim on a much smaller scale. And what we were basically taught there was to that you should make it easier and not harder for people who are the recipients of your message, in order to ease them into it, and then they can learn all the tough stuff later on. So it's kind of similar to this concept, but with Islam, it's not just that you ease people into things or anything like that. It is that if, for example, people approach Muslims and say, "Wait a minute, is it true that in Islam you are supposed to take over our country and subjugate us if you have enough people?" The individual Muslim answering this question actually knows that Islamically the answer is yes. But when they answer this question, they can answer it in such a way that they don't have to answer it fully, but have to but that they omit the truth and kind of present different excuses in response to the question. This happened, for example, I had a discussion a long time ago with a very popular Muslim apologist whose name is Mohammed Hijab, who has like over 1 million subscribers on YouTube. And he lives in the UK. And I asked him, I said to him, so you believe that most people should convert to Islam, and that if we have a Muslim nation, if we have a Muslim population, then the nation should convert to Islam as a whole, right? And then Islamic laws should be established, and those who are not loyal to the Islamic State should be punished. He said, technically, yes, that's what I believe. So I asked him, you live in the UK. Does this mean that you want most people in the UK to convert to Islam? And does this also then entail that you want the UK to become a Muslim nation, an Islamic nation? He said, no. I don't have any intentions to convert the UK to an Islamic country. This contradicts with what he just said, because he just admitted that this is his position. So he had to explain that he right now doesn't want to impose Islamic laws onto the UK, while still believing that most people should convert to Islam, and if we have enough Muslims in the country, we should impose Islamic laws by force or by will. But he has the pass to do this, to lie by omission or by rhetoric.
Okay. You did preaching. That's so interesting. Where did you preach? So I learned actually in Germany. As a teenager, I joined certain people in my own community to go around and offer flyers and stuff to Christians in Germany, and to talk to them about how Islam is true. Thinking back about it, it was so stupid. And I learned from there, and I learned then in Turkey, when I became more seriously religious later on, I was engaged in small groups that would travel around and basically tell people to return to Islam and be more religious and stuff like that. So preaching in that regard only, not on a larger, bigger scale. Okay. Can I ask you an abrasive personal question, but I mean it in a really genuine way. Like, I'm not meaning it in like some agitated way, but it is an abrasive question. I'll just be super clear.
Yes.
Okay. And you can tell me that you're a stupid bitch and I never want to talk to you again. Do you ever feel like, when I'm looking at my chat, I'm seeing people in my chat that I've never seen before. Do you ever fear or worry that you get tokenized by people who want to like use your ideas about Islam to basically like attack all Turkish, probably all brown people, probably just anyone, Persian, Turkish, Arab, etc., etc.?
I never want to talk to you again.
That's nice. And I asked this in a really genuine way. I genuinely
no. So the funny thing is, I made my first video on YouTube like November 2017. And when I made that video, in which I explained basically what this channel is and what I'm going to do in the future, I also briefly addressed and said that with what I'm doing, there will be lots of people who will be joining me and who will be joining my path, and people on the left and on the right who have extreme opinions and all that. And I'm okay with that, as long as they don't try to make me part of their own, political side or whatever it is. I'm very honest about what I think about different political groups and people. And I think that certain, race separatist people are following a completely imbecilic worldview and are dumb as hell. But it's okay if they want to stick around and listen and also get offended here and there, So
yeah, that's fair. Yeah. You must get like race traitor attacks all the time, though, I'm assuming, from like people must like call you like self-hating, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, they call me race traitor. They call me self-hating. They call me what's it called? They use terms that you usually use for black people during slavery who sold out and all that in America. Mm-hmm. Pretty nasty things, mostly from Muslims who accuse me of, as I explained earlier, who basically accuse me of, betraying the so-called Ummah, the community, the Muslim nation.
Well, you're like an apostate times 4, because you haven't just turned from the faith, you speak out publicly, aggressively against the faith.
That's the funny thing. I didn't tell my parents when I left the faith. I didn't know how to do that. I guess I was a little bit afraid of it. And later on, when I eventually did tell them, I told them not only that I left the faith, but also that I'm speaking against it now. It was pretty messed up. So it wasn't very surprising that my father said to me, as long as you do what you do, there is no way for us to consider you our son. So I haven't talked to him since 2019 or so. It's been a long, long time. But yeah, so to them, I'm not only an apostate, and as said, under normal Islamic rules, I should be executed. And those who take their religion seriously and who are Islamists also believe in that. They believe that I should be killed. There was a video viewed by hundreds of thousands of people on YouTube by Ali Dawa, who says, yeah, we admit it. People like you, and he's addressing me, who leave their religion and spread corruption, you will be killed, and we are proud of that. That's what he said. It's still up there. I even reported this to YouTube back then, because they take down everything else that makes such suggestions of violence or oppression. They didn't take it down. They thought this is religious freedom, because when Muslims say such things, it's religious freedom, you know. So they do consider me a traitor who should be executed, but just because of the fact that I also go out and speak against Islam very openly, they also consider me an open enemy of Islam, who under normal circumstances in an Islamic nation would be, lynched and brutally killed and all that. And then there's also the Turkish aspect, of course. Turks have a big problem with me.
Why?
Because Turks have a very, very highly ultra-nationalistic mindset. And that also usually comes with being a Muslim, being religious. If you're no longer a Muslim, they consider you basically also no longer Turkish. And then there's the secular population that is usually okay with it, and that's cool with me. But I also turned kind of around and spoke about how Turkey as a nation did horrible things and should apologize for the Armenian genocide and things like that. So I'm just making enemies everywhere.
Gotcha. And you support Israel, which is obviously probably not very popular.
Yes. Unacceptable.
Gotcha.
And now I'm a Greek Orthodox Christian, and you can't side with Greeks when you're Turkish.
Oh, really? I didn't know that there was is that true, or is that a meme?
No, it is very much true. Turks and Greeks have a very, very bad history, and in Greece today, May 19th actually is when they remember the genocide of the Pontic Greeks, which were the Greeks who lived in the northeastern part of Anatolia, who were ethnically cleansed and removed. I think 300,000 people, or 300,000 or so, were massacred at the end of the First World War. Greece is remembering that today, and Turkey denies that it ever happened or justifies it, and says it was just war, bro. So there is some Turks and Greeks have a very, very complicated history, which I see somebody say that's an understatement, but yeah.
Yeah. How do you? Yeah, I was going to say that makes me think of. Probably a lot of people will be like, oh, wow, you speak against the Armenian genocide, but, you're okay with the Palestinian genocide. I imagine you probably get that a lot. How do you...
Yeah.
One thing that I feel like Israel... So I've had this idea for a long time, which is essentially, I developed it after marrying my husband, who grew up in inner city Edmonton in a homeless shelter, but also just working. I've spent most of my life working with kids from the street, gang members, really violent, aggressive, rough kids. And one thing I think that is really bad in Western democracies that comes from a kind of a good place, which is that we're so far from violence, particularly war-related violence, that we don't really know how to think about it. We don't really know how to engage in it. And I think that the Israel-Palestine conflict is a really good example of this, where Ukraine and Russia, I think, is easier. It's kind of easier to kind of point at who's a bad guy because you've got like one explicit nation invading the sovereignty of another nation. Whereas Israel-Palestine is, I think there are 4 different law systems operating in the West Bank alone, right? Like it is a nightmare to try to disentangle the entire situation and understand it. But also, if you have an extremely immature theory of violence, you're mostly going to see a David and Goliath story, and everyone likes to side with David, essentially. How do you...
Which is very ironic, given Israel.
That's true. It is an ironic metaphor. But how do you reconcile this gap of essentially like Armenian genocide versus like lots of Palestinians dying in Gaza?
Well, so you made a good point. In the West, we are very distant from what conflict actually looks like. So people dying, people think, oh no. Here's the difference, for example, between the Armenian genocide and what is happening in Gaza right now. During the Armenian genocide, early on in the 1910s, and even prior to that, what the Ottoman Empire did was very clear. They made up excuses about the Armenian population that was actually a loyal part of the population. They were fighting Russia at that time, and they accused the Armenian population, because of their ties to Russian culture and Russian religion, of being collaborators with Russia. And they had a few instances here and there. Protests and stuff like that, or political movements. They started building lies, such as that the Armenians are building an underground network to betray and cause a civil war inside the Ottoman Empire. So they directly plotted for the extermination of the Armenians within the empire, and we have the records of that. I mean, we have it all on file. We have captured telegraphs which explicitly say things like. The decision has been made to eternally destroy the Armenian population. It does not matter what gender or what age they are. It will be done. You have other telegraphs instructing officers within the Ottoman Empire, such as you have been given the clear instruction to eradicate the Armenian population. You must do it in such a way that it will not be tied to the central government of the empire. Things like these, these are. It's all out there. We have all the records. So we have the records that they were explicitly and clearly intending to eradicate the Armenian population, and they went about it very clearly. They started going from house to house and collecting all this Armenian civilians. They put most of them into trains with very little to survive. They took a bunch of them on death marches, walking them through the heat and the sand with very little to sustain them, while their own soldiers have food. Many of the Armenians on those death marches died on their way, or were brutally mistreated and raped and killed, and so on. So over 1 million people, over 1 million of them were eradicated in this genocide. It's very clear. There was clear genocidal intent. We have it written, and we have very clear actions where the Armenian side never initiated any conflict or any war, and they were, just because they were Armenians, taken and relocated and brutally killed along the way. Now, when we come to the situation in Gaza, we don't have any of this. First off, we don't have anyone within the government who is actually in charge instructing anyone to eradicate the population. Of course, you have a few fringe voices here and there who may have said some dumb, messed up things, but you don't have any actual authority giving any instructions to eradicate any population. Never happened. Plus, you don't have a population that is being collected all together and indiscriminately killed, or, moved and brought into unlivable circumstances. On the contrary, Israel spends, since the beginning of the war, massive amounts of resources, including time and money, to create safe zones and evacuation zones for the Gazan population. Most of the Gazan population right now lives in clearly marked safe zones. And they say we are currently experiencing a genocide, despite the fact that they all live in sections that are very clearly marked as safe zones. Now, here and there might be instances where those in safe zones are harmed, but most of the population is very clearly instructed to live in safe zones, and they are safe from any harm there right now. Much of the population is being harmed as a result of the ongoing war. But this war was also started by the Gazan side, by Hamas, with the clear aim of, by the way, eradicating the Jewish people. So it's very ironic. You have Hamas going out and starting this war with the intention to eradicate the Jews, and most of the population agreed with this. But now, since they are being brutally crushed, they are now the ones who are complaining about genocide, despite the fact that Israel explicitly made sure that most of the population is safe. You clearly don't have an intent to destroy the population. You don't have indiscriminate killings. You don't have an explicitly stated intent to destroy the population. You don't have any of these things. It's not a genocide. It is a very rough war.
Do you think that if Ben-Gvir had more power, he might be more genocidal in nature?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, I can't deny that. I think that he would go ahead and be genocidal. I'm pretty sure that he would. He wouldn't give a damn. He would probably excuse it and say, "Well, we have to do what is right for our people," and in the future we will justify it and say we had to do it. That's it. Somebody like him would say that, which is why he was also frequently rebuked or excluded from certain talks or meetings around the Gaza situation.
Yeah, it's still crazy the position that he holds at all, to be honest, with how extreme he is. But I mean, Netanyahu basically is, I don't know if you feel the same way. A lot of Israelis feel that Netanyahu is like clinging to power through the war and by making these like coalitions with like more extremist bodies.
I was more charitable until the last action. When was it? Last month or before that?
The Gaza.
The ceasefire was broken. He did that like on the same day that the trial was supposed to continue.
Yeah.
Which was then by default cancelled because the fighting had resumed. So
yeah.
Netanyahu is trying to. The thing is, he might be trying to stay in power through the war. But and I'm not trying to make any excuses for him and for that, but is he then doing this because he just wants to cling to power, or is he doing this because he thinks that he knows best for what's for Israel, and if somebody replaces him, then they will completely screw it up and compromise the Israeli population? And there's that aspect, which is very debatable. I don't know, but I think he has shown good leadership. Mostly after October 7. I think he was very much responsible for what happened on October 7. He has shown good leadership after October 7, and I don't see anyone else who would be able to sufficiently replace him and take over and not mess this up.
Yeah.
That's the problem. You have Netanyahu, and Netanyahu is corrupt. And he does compromise and unite with people that he's against the religious right because he needs them in order to establish a government. These are the weaknesses and the bad aspects that he has, but he's also a leader.
Yeah, it's frustrating because it feels like in talking to different like politicians and stuff, I think this is something Elon Levy said, but if the left part of the Israeli Knesset, I'm never sure how to Knesset. Yeah. If the left wing of it was willing to play ball with Netanyahu more, there could probably be a lot more moderate approach to like how the war is being handled and everything, but they weren't willing to play ball with him. I understand why, but now we're in this situation where Bibi is cozying up to like more and more extreme people because the left like will not engage with him like whatsoever.
That's true. And I think that the war, the beginning of the war has united the country much more. Which could be seen as a good thing, but there's too much of a divide, and there is a worrying aspect of the left in Israel being very ready to compromise on things on their values and on their safety and all that, and it's not very wise. I think that Israel should have been much more harsh and much more pragmatic throughout this entire conflict. I think they have been very much a pushover at many times in this conflict, which dragged on the conflict for too long.
Like, you think they should have sent in like strike forces to Gaza, or what do you mean they've been like soft essentially?
Oh no. So I'm not talking about the current war. The current war is during the current war, Israel has been quite. I think after October 7, I think Israel took a stance of until now we cared about what people say, what the world says. Right now we really don't care. So Israel is in that position right now in this entire war. They really don't seem to care about the backlash. They just want to do whatever is right. But before this, especially leading up to October 7, I think that Israel has been very too loose and compromising in many ways. For example, the situation in Gaza. In 2005, Israel pulled out of Gaza completely and even removed its own citizens. Few of them didn't want to leave. They basically removed them by force.
Yeah.
And say we will get out completely out of here, and then give them this fake autonomy. But the idea was generally that if it doesn't work and if Gaza starts attacking Israel, then we will just go in and finish them off. But then they didn't do that. Hamas took over and started firing and firing and firing, and they just let it happen for 15 years and started building defense systems to just alert people of missiles instead of doing something about it. I think they should have done something about this as soon as it went wrong, for example.
Like as soon as Hamas came into power. But my understanding is that Netanyahu was semi-instrumental in Hamas ascending to power, because having the Palestinians split through a secular and religious side was beneficial to him.
I'm not sure if he was as instrumental in them rising to power, but he knew very well that that if we leave them be, they will elect Hamas, because that was the popular option. People wanted Hamas in power, which also says a lot about the Gazan population, to be honest. Hamas was very explicitly, brutally genocidal at that time. They didn't mince their words at all. They would go on public speeches and say, the solution, brothers and sisters, is to eradicate the filth of the Jews once and for all. So this is how they were speaking when they were elected. So Netanyahu knew this, and the Israelis knew this in general. What Netanyahu did was to keep them in power and to allow Qatar, for example, to send funds over to Hamas. And his reasoning was, if we allow Hamas to receive funds, they will not commit terrorist attacks and they will leave us alone. So we will just have more room to play around and all that and wait this out. There is also the rumor that he allegedly did this as a strategic move because he said it's a good way to divide the Palestinians. But the thing is, this goes back to a rumor. There's like one person who said this. I think it's not even credited.
Yeah.
There is no evidence that he actually said those words.
So I looked it up. As 2012, Netanyahu confided to journalist Dan Margalit, it was important to keep Hamas strong as a counterweight to the PA, and the other site, and that's citing The Nation. Just like
so there's no evidence to it at all. There is just one such report, and that's what everyone is citing. But did he really say that? What did he actually say? I don't know.
There's also claims that he facilitated Qatar cash to Gaza broadly to basically pacify Gaza and prevent the PA from reasserting control there.
That's what I meant. So his idea was, if we just let the funds run through, this will pacify them, and we will handle things on a better basis. I think that neither Netanyahu nor the others actually saw October 7 coming. They thought that this will that they were handling the situation by giving them a false sense of stability, basically. So they thought that this was not going to happen. There were always fears that something like that might happen, but especially preceding the years of October 7, the government and the powers inside Israel were so preoccupied with cracking down on Netanyahu and trying to, get him in political trouble and trying to capture him and all that they completely, and his side was then busy trying to counter that they turned their eyes away from the danger that was coming. So they actually, as much as it might seem difficult to believe for people, Jews and Israelis are not these gods. And they really didn't see October 7 coming. So
yeah. I mean, they get strikes there so often and stuff that I think it sounds like Egypt warned them that something might be coming, and they were like, "Yeah, something's always coming."
Yeah. And if you get missile alerts like every day,
weekly.
every week, that really blurs everything.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. How do you deal with the online hatred? I suspect, just looking at my chat, how much of an explosion of certain comments that I've had to crack down on that I don't typically get about you. How do you deal with online hate? Because I feel like you get a lot, I'm assuming.
Well, the thing is, I spent the last many years getting not just online hate, but brutal death threats and things like that, and had the FBI come over and check in on me and all that very often because of what I'm doing. Initially, it was a little bit anxiety-inducing, but then I kind of got used to it and started ignoring it. So after all of that, the little bit of hate that I'm getting is just really not a big deal, honestly.
Did it get worse after October 7th by any chance, or?
In certain ways, yeah. I think I started getting reactions from people who feel very strongly about Israel and Jews and all that. But most of that is just noise. And I learned to ignore the noise. And I don't know. I don't really know what to think about it. I just ignore it. If there is serious criticism involved here and there, unfortunately, it becomes very difficult to weed out the bad stuff and to see the genuine criticism and to look at it. But if there is genuine criticism here and there, I try to discern it and take it into consideration. But the hate really doesn't really get to me anymore. It's like it's I don't care anymore.
Gotcha. Is there any type of hate that you think maybe I shouldn't actually ask this because I don't want to weaponize. I'm not going to ask this question. How do you discern?
What disturbs you the most? Can we do more of that? No,
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. What's the worst thing people can do to you? And what's your home address? Just kidding. This has been a psyop by Erudite. How do you, if you ignore all hatred, because I feel like when I look at large content creators, it's very much this question of how do you funnel for good feedback of when you're going astray? Because we all go astray at times. We're all incorrect about things. How do you distill for that? Do you have people that you just trust in your life, or?
Yeah, I mean, and I have a few people. I mean, my wife is one that I trust a lot, and there are a few people that I work together with. David Wood, not sure if you know of him. He's a Christian apologist.
Keeps popping up in my chats.
He's a good friend of mine.
Not him, sorry. People mentioning him, I should say.
Yeah. And I trust him a lot, despite the fact that he's a psychopath, which is not a joke. He's a diagnosed psychopath.
Wait, actually?
Yeah, but he's a very good guy. So
interesting. How did he? Hold on. How did he get diagnosed as a psychopath? Has he gone to jail?
Yeah.
Okay. So he took the PCLR there. Okay. I was going to say, most people don't administer that unless you're in jail. Okay. So he has been in jail. Yeah. Interesting.
Oh, he went to prison and spent there for quite a while. And then when he came out, he actually went to university and became a very serious Christian, which I think which started when he was in prison, and then he eventually got a doctorate in philosophy. So big change, you know.
Is he the one that converted you?
I think he's had a lot of influence on me.
Yeah.
I think I'm very, very stubborn and have resisted much of the influence from him for the longest time. And I'm not sure if I could credit him as the one who converted me, but I would say, I mean, nowadays I pray and I say to myself and to God that I pray for him, who had a very big role and influence on me. So I guess he did, you know.
Is he?
And it was also, I asked him actually, before I made a step toward going to church, I asked him about it because I had this whole approach of I have to be 100% sure of something before committing to it. And I asked him about that and he gave me an awesome response to it. And it convinced me to go to church. So
what was his response to that?
I don't think I can fairly represent what he actually said, but it was basically something along the lines of it was in line with an essay, which is about the will to believe, and it was about
it's my favorite essay.
Oh yeah, you know about it. So
my favorite.
So if you're at a spot and you have to go somewhere, and you could go left or right, it would be unwise to just stand there.
Right.
Instead, it would be better to take a path. And I wanted to go the path that I thought was plausible and good, which led me to religion, to Christianity.
Interesting. Okay. Do you have family?
Yeah.
Like your own family? Okay.
Yeah, I got 2 kids, 2 little boys, and a wife. Yeah.
When you look at your childhood versus how you're raising your boys, what do you try to offer them that maybe you didn't have growing up?
Very interesting question. I have to go now.
Actually, ask me for my address. That's a better question. I like that one more.
Jokes aside, I really have to go in like 5 minutes or so, but I want to talk about this as well. So I would say that one of the most difficult things to get away from and to unlearn is when you are raised with in a family that is where the father is very rough and cold, you know. There was a time, actually, when I went back to Turkey to tell them about the changes in my life, that I no longer am a Muslim and all that. What I also brought up was that it was very difficult for all these years to live in a home where I was always afraid to tell my father what's on my mind, because it was always just about discipline and very little feeling involved and all that. And my father was kind of rough, and I don't want to do that. I want to change and give my children a better way. Am I great at doing that? No. But it's also apparently very difficult to be different from the way your father was to you as a father. So those are things that I want to teach them to be more, I don't know, to understand things better, to answer their questions, to respond to their curiosities, to generally give them a happier life, which I think all of us probably need more of.
I do a show, I don't do it often, but I do it for controversial figures, which you yourself are one. It's called The Humanizing. It's where I try to understand why you believe. So I'm not going to grill as much like what you believe, but why you believe what you believe. So it's a lot of digging into like your life and who you are and how you've arrived at conclusions that you have. Would you be open to doing that for my show?
I would, but I would do that maybe in 1 or 2 months.
Okay.
Yeah. I think in the meantime, I'm going to get baptized.
Cool. Yeah, maybe after your baptism, we can do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Would David be open to it? I feel like he'd be a good one for humanizing too.
Probably would be, yeah.
Okay. maybe I'll ask you about connecting us after then as well.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I know
be
you have
happy
to get going, so thank you for giving me so much of your time.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I actually followed you for quite a while, and I knew about you because I know Destiny.
Oh no, I'm such an asshole. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, you are. Yeah. No, I have been more familiar with your circles and with Destiny and all that over the last 2 years or so.
Yeah.
So because of Destiny, I heard of you and knew about you a little bit, not very much.
Yeah.
So. Happy to connect and many, many thanks for inviting me. It was a very nice conversation.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. Have a good night.
See ya. You too.